So on September the 17th of 2025, something unusual happened in the AI world, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about it. So a Chinese startup called DeepSeek had its latest AI system, the R1 model, published in Nature. And for those that don't know what Nature is simply one of the most prestigious science journals in the world. And that might sound like a small detail, but wait a second, it's actually very historic. And this is why I think this is a very, very important event. So, because this is the very, very first time a major AI model has been fully peer reviewed, like a scientific discovery, right? And I think it's a very, very smart move. Now, until now, most AI announcements came through blog posts or maybe even splashy press releases, right? Some will put up very impressive demos. Sure, but trust us, right? They're telling you, trust us, we've built this. But DeepSeek is actually taking another step. They put their model through independent academic scrutiny. Now, in the AI world, if you know, that's very, very new. And that's not the only reason people are paying attention to what's happening and what DeepSeek actually did, right? So another, you know, set of interesting things that happened during this publication is what DeepSeek did differently. And I'll really talk about some of the things that I feel really stood out. Okay. So, number one, it was the cost efficiency of the publication, right? Training AI usually costs millions and millions and millions and 10,000s of millions of dollars. But DeepSeek claims that they trained their R1 for just a little less than $300,000, right? Some people might think that's just pocket change, but it's a fraction of what their rivals actually spend on these demos or impressive shows, right? So now imagine somebody building a rocket that costs 1% of NASA's budget and it actually flies. Isn't that wonderful? Right? So, number two, interesting observation is the hardware workarounds, right? So, the US actually banned certain high end NVIDIA chips from being sold to China. And like I mentioned at the beginning, DeepSeek is Chinese, right? So, DeepSeek still found a way. They used slightly less advanced, but still legal versions. They are called the H800 chips and made them work with clever engineering. In short, export bans didn't stop DeepSeek from going a step further with their innovation, and they used creativity to actually make this happen. Another interesting observation is that open access. So, what DeepSeek actually did is with their R1 model, they didn't lock it up. The model is freely downloadable, and as of now, it's been downloaded over 10 point, almost 11 million times on Hugging Face, a popular platform for AI tools, right? So now think about that. It's not just one lab playing with this. It's researchers, it's startups, maybe even high school students worldwide playing with these models. Okay, that's an interesting thing happening. Number four is there's a lot of clarity about the data, right? So many AI companies are very vague and sometimes even very evasive about how they train their models, right? And there've been concerns of bias and all those things, but DeepSeek has done something different. They have addressed a big suspicion head on. The R1 model was not trained on competitors' outputs like ChatGPT, right? Instead, they relied on reinforcement learning, a trial and error process where the model actually learns to reason by being rewarded for correct steps. Smart, I know, right? Number five is that what's very interesting to me is the market shockwaves happening, right? When DeepSeek first released the R1 in January, the US tech stocks actually fell sharply. And you might ask yourself why. It is because investors suddenly realize that powerful AI can come from outside Silicon Valley, faster, cheaper, and just as credible. Okay? So now somebody might be asking, why is this actually a big deal? Even if you're not a technical person, right? I'll explain it to you. AI just got cheaper. The entry ticket to build powerful models isn't 10 millions of dollars anymore. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the barrier to entry has actually been reduced. Okay. So in lowering the barrier, you will find that universities, startups, governments worldwide are able to access these models. Okay. So what we should be looking forward to is that now we'll have to expect a flood of new players on the market because they have more access to models like R1, right? And another thing is that peer reviews actually raise the bar. Until now, companies like OpenAI and Google could say, trust us, it works, our tool works. But now DeepSeek is saying they went an extra mile by letting scientists tear into their methods, right? So this pressures the whole industry. If one company can prove it works, others will be asked, why can't they? Why can't they do it when they have bigger budgets, right? And doing it wouldn't even cost them a 1% of their budget, right? Another thing, what this thing has showed us is that the ability for, even if there are geopolitics happening, export bans, for example, do not necessarily guarantee control. The US restricted the chips, the NVIDIA chips, right? But DeepSeek proved that you can actually build something remarkable without the best hardware, right? So the restrictions might have slowed them down, but didn't actually stop them. They went ahead and managed to produce this model and actually have it peer reviewed. Okay. So now I know having this open access is great, right? There's lower barrier to entry, but open access is a double-edged sword. Millions of downloads mean innovation will accelerate. Okay. And by acceleration, it could also mean that it can easily be misused. Anyone with enough skill and imagination could adapt the model for teaching, for research, or for actually harmful purposes, for attacks. So the balance of power is shifting. If AI capability spreads more widely, the competitive edge moves from who can build it to who can use it responsibly. So, what does this mean for the rest of us? So, what this basically means for the rest of us is that AI won't just come from certain geographical spaces anymore. For decades, the tech world has been dominated by Silicon Valley companies, right? But DeepSeek is a sign that the future will be multipolar. It can be anywhere. It can be in Africa, it can be in Europe, it can be in China, and others will play big roles too. So we will see more AI in daily life faster. When models become cheap and open, they show up in more products, in schools, right? In workplaces. It won't just be Microsoft or Google, right? Embedding AI everywhere. It will be local startups too. They have the access to these tools and to these models too. So when that happens, we really need to start talking about safety questions, right? So if a peer-reviewed paper tells us how DeepSeek built R1, but doesn't solve every problem, right? So safety questions get sharper. A peer-reviewed paper tells us how DeepSeek built their model, but it doesn't solve every problem. What we need to start asking ourselves is, can R1 spread misinformation? Can it be hijacked by scams? Those questions still remain. Trust is the new currency. If cost is no longer the barrier, the scarce thing becomes credibility. So, which models do we trust to handle sensitive data? And this is something that I am mostly interested in. Heavily regulated industries, because they handle PII, right? They handle personal identifying information. They handle so many sensitive information that could destroy or even build the lives of people. So which models do we trust to handle this sensitive information? Which models do you trust to teach our kids? Which models do we trust to help our doctors? The answer won't just depend on who is the fastest, but who is the most transparent. Okay? So the bottom line is DeepSeek R1 is a breakthrough, not just technically, but symbolically as well. It proves three things at once. Powerful AI can be built outside Silicon Valley. It doesn't have to cost a fortune, and it can stand up to real scientific scrutiny as well. But here's the hard truth. The genie is out of the bottle again. What used to be rare is no longer rare, right? Cutting edge AI. is now cheap and downloadable. What that means is that innovation will spread faster, but so will risk. The question isn't who will build the next big model anymore. That's already happening everywhere. The question is who will take responsibility for how these models are used.